All right, I'm Anthony Bainey. I'm here with Michael Mottern and Kevin. How you feeling today, Michael?
Excellent, excellent.
How you feeling, Kevin?
Pretty good.
Sounds good. And we're going to talk about the 2024 election. And since we've talked, RFK Jr. dropped out or suspended his campaign. So that's one interesting update to the campaign cycle for this presidential election. What are your thoughts on that, Michael?
Well, I do believe that RFK is like the albatross, not only on the Republican Party, but on the Democratic Party, most importantly, because of his legacy and who he came from and all the Kennedy clan and stuff like that. I really, really, really enjoyed in history, in the study of history, like uh, learning about how his father was once senator in New York very briefly, but still an anti-war candidate, and then went to the Mississippi Delta in 1964 to give out free lunches and register people to vote. One time, Professor Robbins, he was a Stalinist CPUSA professor of mine at Erie Community College that taught me history one and two, told me that when he went to register people to vote in 64 in the Deep South, specifically in Mississippi, that there was a man who was a World War One veteran who was an African American who was living in a doghouse and had no legs. Living in a doghouse and having no legs. So every time I think of RFK going to the Delta and caring for the children and black people that lived there, and the amount of poverty that they had to endure, I think of his father, and I think what a betrayal of the legacy. Holy shit!
Any thoughts on the impact on the election with RFK dropping out, suspending?
Yeah,
Um,
oh god, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I think
Kev,
the
go ahead.
elections. I think the election's a psyop. Personally, the whole election is a psyop. Unless you have direct democracy, it's not real democracy.
All right, Kev. Michael, how do you think RFK dropping out? Michael, how do you feel about RFK dropping out? Do you think it impacts the election?
Well, I really don't appreciate him with his father being who he was, chumming up with Trump just because he's anti-vaxxer and Trump is more alternative in that aspect where you would appoint somebody like that to Health and Human Services, which he shouldn't. I believe in vaccinations. That's just my opinion. But no, I care more about the bear cub that he brought to Central Park than I do about him or his campaign or whatever the hell he's going to do with Donald Trump and why he would even think about chumming up with a monster like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is one of the most dangerous men in America, next to David Duke and Oliver North.
All right, Kev. So besides the election being a psyop, do you have any thoughts on the election, given, the amount of attention that's been given to the two candidates in terms of, do you have any thoughts on the other candidates? Any ideas that you want to see talked about during this election cycle at all?
Landlords is basically the number one concern, and then I
No, what
think
do you
we
mean by like the landlords? I think we had talked about
like hoarding property, hoarding residential property. That's like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. And I don't know why people can't talk about it. It's like this weird like mood in the air, and it's like, why don't we address this? Congress is failing to do their duties, and the leftists talk about late stage capitalism a lot, and you have to wonder if we're there yet.
Any thoughts, Michael, on that, topic of landlords hoarding property and just, not necessarily enough shelter or, you know, the effects of that?
Yeah, the housing market is probably the big concern that people don't talk about.
I know
It is-
because of price gouging and soft costs and hold the bucket ratio, what used to be $3,000 airplane hangars for housing after World War II when they had a shortage of housing in Los Angeles area, I know now is like several $1 million compared to what the cost used to be. Like for instance, to have a room in to be the equivalency of like a HUD house that's newly affordable housing that's like per unit. I think it's like $500,000 in some city per unit. That's too high. That's way too high.
That's crazy.
That's hold a bucket ratio for something that's no more different than my HUD apartment, and that's supposed to be affordable housing.
Right.
where they
Yeah.
gout the government like that for 500,000. It used to be about, I think, $3 million today, but or back then. But if $3 million back then was, I think, in today's terms, like, oh my god. Or I have it a little bit backwards. The airplane hangar, I think, would have cost between $3,000 and $30,000 per unit. But what Bill Maher talks about in his price gouging slash soft cost bullshit, uh, you can't you can't embezzle. The hold the bucket ratio gets a lot smaller when it's just $3,000 or $30,000, if you know what I mean. I mean, they want it to be more so they can inflate the cost, so they could trim off a piece for their friends. And that's not really good. That's why we can't have high speed rail and good services in this country, because of soft costs and that corruption, legal corruption, underhandedness, where unions, unfortunately, are not immune.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to bring up.
Thank
And I
you.
really do wish that, housing was more talked about. I think there's been a little bit of discussion of the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. I mean, I don't know if that really has much to do with, the amount of land that people hold. That's definitely not a discussion that's in the election and cycle that I've heard from any buddy, and how much property landlords hold. Um, Now, in terms of this election cycle, have you seen a lot of growing support for any of the candidates? I've been seeing more Kamala signs when I've been out and about. What about you, Kev? Or what do you think, Michael?
I believe that Kamala Harris is getting more signage. I hope. I think I've only seen one sign so far, but I haven't really pounded the pavement like I should, and I really went for a walk. But I do know my mom, who's not apolitical, but she's got she's got back and knee problems, so she doesn't really want to take to the doors, and she's not feel comfortable talking to people door to door. The last political direct action she did was when she was 12 years old. My mother tabled at St. Paul's School when she went to St. Paul's School in Victoria and Kenmore. She tabled for president or for presidential candidate, Democratic Party presidential candidate George McGovern, because she was very anti-Nixon. And she told me about that. And I was very proud of her for doing that. But she wants to lick stamps. She wants to lick envelopes. She does not want to go door to door or have to do a phone bank list. That could be tedious for somebody who's not really as active. So I understand some people want to be active, but try. Some people can, or have a disability which would inhibit them from going door to door or doing too much, whether it's reading or writing or a knee problem.
Well, we lost Kev. So, on that note, I mean, I have been seeing more support for Kamala. I am worried with RFK Jr. dropping out, how that will, swing votes over to Trump. I think that the polls do show that. That tends to happen with RFK, swinging over to support Trump. I think that the polls show that he will, get more support in the national polls from that. Um, so I'm still leaning towards thinking Trump will win. Um, Kev, you have any last thoughts on the election in terms of any growing support for any of the candidates that you see or anything like that?
Um, yeah, I just don't get enthusiastic about it. I just can't get enthusiastic about it. I know there's like all the hype about the news and the polls and the blah blah blah, and it's just like how much of this is fake news and like how much of this doesn't matter. It's all kind of tiring, you know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fatigue. All right, well, on that note, I appreciate you, Kev. I really do. I know you bring an interesting perspective, and Michael, I appreciate you too, man. Thank you for all
Thank
the
you.
conversations we've had. All right, guys, have a wonderful night. Stay safe.
Stay safe.